Is it laundry day, Madeline? One of the interns whispered with a smirk, nudging her friend as the secretary walked past. Or is beige the new rebellion? Another chuckled, loud enough for the office to hear. But it was Victoria Halston, the CEO herself, who twisted the knife later that morning. She walked into the morning briefing, eyes scanning Madeline's modest blouse and well-worn skirt, then said dryly, "We represent global brands here, not thrift stores." The room laughed. Madeline didn't. She just nodded, took notes, and left the room as if nothing had happened. But what no one in that room knew, not the assistants, not the managers, not even Victoria, was that the woman they'd mocked had just received access to something that could unravel every lie behind Halston and Ryder's gleaming image. After listening to the whole story, you will definitely share your opinion in the comments. So let's move towards the story. Halston and Ryder perched high above the skyline in a building made of steel and glass. It was less a workplace and more a world unto itself, elegant, ruthless, and polished down to the last marble tile. No one ever walked too loudly here. No laughter echoed for too long. Even the coffee was poured like it had a meeting in 5 minutes. Victoria Halston, co-founder and CEO, ruled it like an empress. Not with tantrums or threats. She didn't need to. Her power lived in the way people straightened their backs when she passed, how conversations died mid-sentence when she entered a room. She had a presence that made people nervous even when she smiled. Especially when she smiled. Her suits were always tailored. Her words always measured. Her shoes, red-soled and sharp, announced her arrival before her voice did. She didn't believe in second chances or second looks. In her world, you either belonged or you didn't. Madeline Ray worked just outside her office. If Victoria was fire, Madeline was water. Quiet, still necessary. A woman in her early 40s, she had an unassuming presence, the kind of person others thanked absently without looking up. She arrived before sunrise and left after the elevator stopped running. Her desk was always organized, her calendar color-coded to perfection, her demeanor calm. But she didn't fit. Her outfits were functional. Modest sweaters, faded skirts, shoes that had clearly been reheeled more than once. Her coat was a shade of gray that once might have been something else. There were threads near the cuffs. A missing button, replaced with one that didn't match. Always clean. Always pressed. But never quite Halston. The others noticed. Of course they did. In this office, everyone noticed everything. Most didn't say anything aloud. They just smiled and talked a little softer around her. But sometimes, especially when the right people were watching, the quiet gave way to something colder. That Thursday morning was one of those days. It was the quarterly leadership prep. Executives filed in with their top-floor lattes and curated confidence, teeth white and voices louder than necessary. The conference room was all glass and glare, polished steel chairs that no one ever really sat comfortably in. Madeline had been setting up since 7, arranging folders, testing the projector, triple-checking the printed agendas. By 8:58 a.m., everyone was in place. Madeline moved around the table in her sensible flats, laying out last-minute updates with her usual efficiency. She was halfway to the door when Victoria arrived. The room shifted when she entered. A few stood. One even chuckled nervously and said, "The Queen has arrived." Victoria didn't acknowledge it, but she smirked slightly, like the comment had only barely earned her attention. Her eyes scanned the room, landed on Madeline. "Stopped. Wait," she said sharply, waving a hand in the air. What is that?" Everyone turned. Madeline paused, caught mid-step. "Ma'am, that outfit," Victoria said, stepping closer. "Did you forget this was an office, not a thrift store?" The room went still. The kind of still that buzzes in the ears. A few awkward smiles, someone biting the inside of their cheek. The head of legal glanced at his notes, pretending not to hear. Madeline straightened her back slightly. "It's clean and professional." Victoria's eyebrows lifted in mock concern. "Is that what we're calling it now?" She turned to the group. "I mean, am I crazy here? That skirt looks like it's seen a war zone." Someone laughed. Another coughed into their hand to hide a grin. "I'm not trying to be cruel," Victoria went on, pacing slowly past the chairs. "But optics matter. If the first thing our clients see is that outfit, what exactly are we saying about our standards?" The words weren't shouted, but they hit harder than a raised voice. It was the delivery, cool, measured, amused. A tone that made it clear, This wasn't concern. This was performance. Madeline didn't move. Her face gave nothing away, but inside, something tightened. Not embarrassment. Not yet. Just a quiet sort of freezing. I'm sure there's a Goodwill nearby, Victoria added, reaching for her own folder. Or maybe we can take up a little collection for her. Charity begins at home, after all. The CFO let out a soft snort. Someone from HR looked away entirely. Madeline looked at the woman across the table, Cheryl, from operations. They had once shared a silent elevator ride after a late night. Cheryl had smiled then. But now, she looked down at her pen, scribbling nothing. The laughter ended quickly. The meeting began. But the air didn't recover. Madeline stepped out of the room and walked back to her desk. Not fast. Not slow. Just steady. She sat down, unzipped her bag, pulled out her notepad. She heard the meeting continue through the glass walls. Heard Victoria's voice rise and fall, confident, precise. She had the room. She always did. Madeline stared down at her hands. They weren't shaking. Not yet. The blouse she wore, light blue, with faint vertical lines, had belonged to her sister. One of the last gifts before the hospital days began. The skirt? A simple beige line. Purchased 5 years ago, worn through job interviews and custody hearings, nights in the ER, and one funeral. She smoothed it with both hands, as if that might erase something. Her eyes lifted to the skyline beyond the glass. Inside the drawer on her right was a black leather-bound notebook, unmarked, worn at the edges. She opened it slowly, flipped through a few pages. Names, dates, numbers, tidy handwriting, notations made during late nights, in quiet frustration, after conversations others had already forgotten. She turned to a page marked compliance, Q2 anomalies, and began to add another line. There was still work to finish. The hallway outside the boardroom buzzed faintly with overlapping voices and the occasional clink of glass. From her desk, Madeline could still hear fragments of conversation. Phrases like projected margins, China rollout, and Victoria's killing it floated through the air like dry leaves. She ignored them. Instead, she stared at her screen, blinking at a half-written compliance memo, cursor tapping like a heartbeat. The overhead lights hummed. Somewhere down the hall, someone laughed too loud, that brittle kind of laugh people do when they're trying to be heard. Her fingers rested on the keys, unmoving. A memory tugged at her, uninvited. 4 years ago, she was sitting across a long metal table in a small, poorly lit room, waiting for a social worker to come back with paperwork. Her lawyer had leaned in and whispered, "Keep your voice level. Don't show emotion. They'll be watching for that." And now, here she was again. Different table, different stakes. Same rules. Madeline closed the compliance file. She stood, smoothed her skirt again, and walked toward the kitchen. It wasn't a place people lingered much, too sterile, too exposed, but she needed the walk. Needed to feel her shoes against the floor and remind herself she still existed. When she reached the kitchenette, she poured herself a paper cup of lukewarm coffee and stared out the narrow window above the sink. That's when she heard them. 2 voices behind the glass partition just around the corner. "Did you see her face?" a woman whispered. "I thought she was going to cry." "Did you see her shoes?" another voice giggled. "They're practically antiques." She looked like a middle school librarian on Casual Friday. The first woman added, voice full of performative concern. "I mean, this isn't a church basement." "Victoria's a savage," said the other. "God, I love her." Their footsteps faded. Madeline didn't move, just stared at her reflection in the window. The sunlight caught the faint lines at the corners of her mouth, the frizz near her temples, a bit of lint on her sleeve. She picked it off, quietly. Behind her, the coffee machine sputtered. The air smelled like plastic and fatigue. She returned to her desk slowly. Saturday. Folded her hands. A few minutes later, the glass doors to the boardroom opened, and executives poured out in ones and twos, all in various shades of navy and charcoal, teeth bared in small victorious grins. Victoria didn't emerge, but Cheryl did. She paused near Madeline's desk, adjusting her scarf, eyes scanning the room like she was waiting for someone else. Then, half turning, she glanced at Madeline. Their eyes met. A beat passed. Then Cheryl gave a smile, tight-lipped, polite, and moved on. Madeline's gaze followed her until she vanished around the corner. Then she pulled open her drawer again. This time, she didn't look at the notebook. She reached beneath it and drew out an old laminated badge clipped to a faded lanyard. The badge was from a different life, a different company. She turned it over once in her hand, then slid it back. Around 11:15 a.m., Victoria finally stepped out. Her heels tapped the floor with that same surgical precision. Madeline rose automatically. "I've sent the follow-up notes to your inbox," she said, voice even. Victoria didn't stop walking. "You can schedule my call with Sanderson at 3. And tell Marla to send me last year's Q2 variances." "Already printed and highlighted," Madeline replied. That made Victoria pause. Only slightly. She turned her head, not all the way, just enough to offer one glance over her shoulder. Her tone was cool. "At least your organization is better than your wardrobe." And she was gone. Madeline sat again, slowly, letting the room exhale. She glanced toward her inbox. 15 unread messages. One from Sanderson's team already requesting a new briefing document. She began replying, her fingers automatic, eyes calm. By the time the clock struck noon, she had completed 3 full reports, corrected 2 scheduling errors someone else had made, and sent 4 cross-departmental emails that no one would remember she wrote. At 12:45, Cheryl returned. This time she carried a brown paper bag and a smoothie in one hand. "Hey," she said, slightly out of breath. I grabbed an extra sandwich. From that deli on 4th. I thought maybe, if you hadn't eaten yet." Madeline looked up. Cheryl's eyes flickered. Just thought I'd offer." Madeline studied her for a moment, then nodded politely. "Thanks. But I brought something." Cheryl hesitated. "Okay. Yeah, of course. Maybe next time." She walked away quickly. Madeline opened her drawer again. There was no lunch inside, just her notebook. And the badge. She didn't feel like eating. Instead, she opened a new browser tab, typed in a login to a site most people at Halston and Ryder didn't even know existed. A legal document repository, old contracts, intellectual property filings. Then she searched for something. Halston and Ryder, internal patent disputes, 2019. 3 results appeared. Her eyes narrowed. One of the entries listed her own name as a ghost contributor. No official credit. But her digital ID had flagged edits and annotations in the document history. She clicked on it. Scanned the metadata. Her notations were still there. Suggestions she'd made during an all-nighter when the company's lead counsel had been traveling and the junior lawyers didn't know the difference between a clause and a clause qualifier. She had saved them a 6-figure licensing error. No one ever said thank you. But the records were still there. Digital footprints she had quietly made, thinking, at the time, that it would matter. And maybe now it did. At 1:30, Madeline stood, walked to the elevator. She pressed the button for floor 26, the one with the legal and ethics division. Not her usual domain, but she knew someone there. Daniel Park. He'd been with the firm 5 years. A Harvard law grad with tired eyes and a decent sense of humor. They had once worked together on a holiday schedule dispute when no one else would touch it. She knocked on his door. He looked up, surprised. "Madeline, everything okay?" She smiled faintly. "I need a favor. Just a review. Off the record." Daniel leaned back. "That sounds dangerous." "It's not. Yet." He motioned for her to sit. "All right. What's the file?" Madeline handed him a printed sheet, a cross-reference breakdown of internal contribution logs, flagged edits, and one questionable IP clause signed off under another assistant's name. Daniel's brow furrowed as he scanned. "These are from the Rydell software filing." She nodded. "This isn't small stuff," he murmured. "Why are you looking into this now?" Madeline shrugged. "Just tying up loose ends." Daniel studied her. If this goes anywhere, it won't stay quiet." "I'm not asking you to blow a whistle," she said softly. "Just to tell me what it's worth." He nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll take a look." She stood. "Thank you." As she left his office, she felt the tiniest shift beneath her ribs. Not pride. Not yet. But the sensation that something was turning. Quietly. Like a wheel just beginning to roll. She returned to her floor. At her desk, she resumed typing. Calm. Steady. Eyes forward. Victoria passed her once on the way to the executive lounge. Didn't stop. Didn't speak. But Madeline didn't need her to. She just kept working. The rain came softly on Friday morning. One of those slow, persistent drizzles that made the city look like it had been rinsed in gray. Umbrellas bobbed along the sidewalk outside the high-rise. Inside Halston and Ryder, the air smelled like wet coats and burnt espresso. Madeline arrived at 8:07 a.m., exactly as she always did. Same long black coat. Same reusable coffee cup in one hand. Her shoes were polished. Her hair tucked simply behind her ears. She stepped through the lobby, past security, past the concierge who never remembered her name, past the double-glass doors etched with the firm's silver logo, H&R, restructure, reclaim, rise. No one looked up, but in her bag, beneath her scarf, was a simple white folder. A folder Daniel Park had slipped to her late last night after hours. She hadn't expected him to come through that quickly, but he had. And what he found, it wasn't just worth something. It was leverage. She reached her desk and sat, calmly, as if nothing had changed, as if her world hadn't realigned just slightly, one gear clicking into place behind her. At 9:12 a.m., Cheryl approached her. "Morning," Cheryl whispered, eyes darting toward Victoria's office door, which was still shut. "You okay?" "I'm fine." Cheryl hesitated, then leaned down. "I saw the memo. You're being moved to archival." Madeline didn't react. "I requested it." Cheryl blinked. "You wait, what?" "What?" Madeline looked up. Her eyes were steady. Sometimes quiet corners are good places to think. Cheryl looked confused, a little hurt. "But that's a dead end. No one even reads those reports. You'll vanish in there." Madeline offered a faint smile. "Exactly." Before Cheryl could ask more, Victoria's office door opened. She strode out in a crisp navy sheath dress, heels tapping like a metronome. "Cheryl, briefing room. Now." Then her eyes slid toward Madeline. Cold. Sharp. Madeline looked back. No emotion. No twitch. Just stillness. Victoria moved on. By noon, the floor had cleared. Friday lunch meetings, coffee runs, social posturing disguised as networking. The usual. Madeline walked to the printer, collected a stack of documents, slipped one white folder in the middle. Then she walked, not to Victoria's desk, not to the compliance director, not even to HR. She walked to the 27th floor. Investor relations. It was quieter there, more clinical. People walked with purpose, eyes on numbers, not rumors. At the end of the corridor was a conference room with smoked glass walls. Inside, a man in his early 60s sat alone, scrolling through a tablet. Gregory H. Lark, lead board member. Discreet, old school, impossible to bluff. She knocked once. He looked up. "Yes. I have something you'll want to see," Madeline said. Her voice was calm, precise. His brow raised. "And you are?" She stepped forward. "The one who's been writing your monthly performance digest for the past 2 years under someone else's login." A beat. Then, "Come in." She placed the folder on the table in front of him, opened it, and began to explain. Not all at once. Not in some dramatic, movie-like monologue. She simply laid out the facts. Quietly, line by line. The uncredited patent edits. The internal filing misattributions. The use of her digital ID in back-end software that had helped seal a $2.4 million licensing deal without any formal attribution. And then she showed him something else. A document signed by Victoria Wren last year. A time-stamped legal affidavit affirming she had overseen all patent contributions in-house, with no external consultants or assistants involved. Gregory leaned back. He didn't ask many questions. When she was done, he closed the folder and said, "Thank you." Madeline nodded. "I'm not interested in lawsuits. I'm not threatening the firm." He studied her. "Then what do you want?" She looked out the window for a moment. Then she turned back. "To be seen." He nodded once. She left. The next hour passed like any other. Phones rang. Emails chimed. The elevator dinged. But at 2:15 p.m., Victoria was summoned upstairs. She didn't return for the rest of the day. At 3:03, Cheryl walked by Madeline's desk again, this time pale and whispering. "What's going on? Did you hear? They're holding a closed-door session on the 27th. With the board." Madeline glanced at the clock, then resumed typing. "You should take your lunch before it gets cold." "But wait, Madeline, did you?" She didn't answer. By 4:30, news began to filter down. Victoria Wren was being transitioned. Effective immediately. The language was carefully vague. A strategic reorganization. Internal leadership alignment. A temporary advisory title until year's end. Everyone acted shocked, but not surprised. At 5 p.m., Cheryl appeared again, looking stunned. "She's gone." Madeline stood and gathered her things. Cheryl leaned closer. "I don't get it." She was untouchable. "No one's untouchable," Madeline said softly. "Just unchallenged." As she reached the elevator, Cheryl grabbed her sleeve. Wait. Please. Can I ask, what is your story? Madeline paused. Then, for the first time in days, she gave a genuine smile. I'm just the woman who knew where the paper trail started. She stepped into the elevator. As the doors closed, she could see Cheryl still standing there, eyes wide. 2 weeks later, the archival department on floor 18 was quiet. Dim lighting, rows of temperature-controlled shelves, walls lined with silent reports no one read. A place for forgotten things. Old records, closed cases. And Madeline was here, by choice. Not hiding, not retreating, just building something. She now had her own space, her own key, her name printed neatly on the wall outside. Madeline Price, Research Liaison. The title meant little on paper, but the board knew her name now. And more importantly, they sent her documents. Not requests, drafts, first passes, things they wanted her opinion on. Quietly, discreetly. She never corrected them. She just gave answers. One afternoon, as she was reviewing a redacted merger proposal, a package arrived. No note, no name. Inside, a sleek black pen, gold-tipped, expensive. She smiled. She knew who sent it, and she knew it meant more than an apology. It meant respect. She placed it in her drawer, next to the badge from her old job, the one she still kept as a reminder, not a failure, but of how far she'd come. Outside her office, the printer whirred. The building hummed. Life moved on. But inside, Madeline worked, calm, precise, and invisible only when she chose to be. No spotlight, no applause, just power. The quiet kind. The kind that leaves no fingerprints, but rewrites everything. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, don't forget to like, comment where you're watching from, and subscribe for more powerful stories just like this. New uploads every day. Your support helps these voices get heard. Until next time, stay quiet, stay strong.